Lark E. Mason thought he had seen it all, but during one episode, he was confronted with a statue that left him stunned and shocked, especially when the women told him how she had acquired such a unique item. It should have been just another episode of Antiques Roadshow for Lark E. Mason, but it turned into a story that he would recall time to time again. It was early 2002. As the owner walked towards him, Mason's eyes only saw the lion statue that was being brought to him. He had spent a lifetime learning and teaching about antiques, especially from China, so if anyone could find more about the unassuming statue, it was Mason. The first question Mason asked was, how did she get it? But the answer wasn't as simple as the question. It seemed that the statue has been in the owner's family for a long time. My grandparents picked it up. They traveled a lot in China, she said. When were they in China? Mason asked. The lady replied by saying, probably in the early part of the century. My mother's had it in her house, and since then, I inherited it and brought it west. She said. Since then, the statue has stayed in the corner of her living room. She even gave it a name, Leo the Lion. Mason was lost for words and was slightly trembling. His deep love for history and antiques were making it hard for him to stay professional. This is among the finest examples of Chinese art that we have seen on the Roadshow. The carving is beautiful. The workmanship is stunning. Mason continued. The carver who did this was truly a master. It's truly magnificent. To the layman's eyes, the loin statue looks like any other, but Mason tried to explain why he was so overwhelmed by this piece of history by showcasing the small details around the side of the status. But still, this detail still does not seem enough to drive the antique expert to tears. It was also because of its rarity. I see little tiny versions of these that come in for sale, but never does one see one like this, he said. And he wasn't exaggerating. To date, they haven't been found a single statue of this size in the same style, and surely they were once created, but none has survived and made into the hands of historians. It wasn't just the size that Mason was impressed with, but also that most other lion statues which had survived had some damage to them, but Leo seemed to have been untouched by history. Something that has been handled and has been around for a while. It's a great thing. Rarely do you find something so beautiful and unscathed that has been around for so long. Most statues or artifacts as old as the statue would have at least had a handful of blemishes. But one thing, that was rather off about this statue, and a reason why the owner never thought it was worth anything was because the artist didn't sign it. The owner brought up, thinking that would affect the value of the piece, but Mason had an explanation for that as well. No, these were never signed, Mason followed up with, and assuring her that it wouldn't affect the value. The owner's initial search for information regarding the statue, she was told that it was likely from the Ming Dynasty, but just with a look, Mason knew that this wasn't the case, and this is another reason why he was so emotional in the first place. It was from the Tang Dynasty. This dates from the golden period of Chinese art, which is called the Tang Dynasty, between the 6th century and the 9th century, he said. While we haven't done the math, but just by looking at the time frame, you can imagine that it was a very, very, very long ago. This time period is also considered by many experts to be the golden age of art in ancient China. Everything from music to literature was changing and evolving in this era, creating some of the most iconic items in the world, including Leo the Loin. Another example, which will provide more context to how important Leo was to history, is to know that recently, the Longmen Grottos, a cave system depicting Chinese Buddhist carvings, was turned given World Heritage status by the governing body of UNESCO since the turn of the millennium. The carvings were referred to as an outstanding manifestation of human artistic creativity for their size and magnificence, and this loin statue was created somewhere during the same time. When the lion statue resurfaced, it surely headlines inside the Antiques Roadshow community. On the official website of the show, Larry Canale, who is the editor-in-chief, has said that the Leon is one of, if not the greatest and most important antiques to ever pass through the Antiques Roadshow. And now, we reveal what you all came here for. The value of the item about which Mason said, "I would feel pretty confident that one could get between $120,000 and $180,000 for it," he said. However, that might not be its true value. "Now, the value I gave you is an auction estimate value," he said, "but an insurance figure on this would be somewhere between $150,000 and $250,000, probably toward the high end. Imagine an 18-inch statue costing a colossal $250,000, and this was in 2002. This figure would have skyrocketed, and even some believed at the time that it should and would be worth much more. You would think the owner would immediately be ready to sell this family heirloom, but turns out she had other plans. A couple of years ago, Larry Canal revealed that he, like us, was intrigued as to what happened to Leo the Loin. Turns out, despite Mason's insistence and appreciation of the statue and stating that it belonged in a museum, the owner quietly took it back home. It seemed like all she wanted was the value to Appraised, and Leo would stay with her, in her living room, waiting to be handed down to the next generation of her family.